Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Love's Teaching Will Travel, where we dive into topics that matter the most. I'm your host, KJ, and today we're going to go a little bit into a critical issue that's been topping off a lot of social media topics, a lot of news articles and news reports, and it highlights what's been going on with educators around the world, and this is burnout. Today, we're going to talk about recognizing burnout. I know many of you have been sharing your stories. Many of you have been, sharing things on social media relating to burnout and wanting to make a change in your career, wanting to either leave the field of education altogether or just try to transition into something new. And I'm here today to talk about some options that you might have, as well as thinking about burnout from different perspectives. Now, burnout is a significant problem in the field of education, yet it goes so unrecognized and so unaddressed. Unfortunately, right, we're talking about it as educators, but the administration, our elected officials, like they're not getting into the deep dive of it, and they're not exploring it, they're not talking about it, and they're not figuring out ways to address it. So, first of all, let's start by defining burnout. So, what is burnout? Burnout is not simply just feeling tired or stressed, it's a state of first of all, emotional, physical, mental exhaustion caused by prolonged stress. I want you to really think about that now. Prolonged stress. Now, if you've been in the field let me rewind. If you've been in the field 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you've been under some level of prolonged stress, and these things were heightened by the pandemic. So, thinking about what burnout is, what are some signs of burnout, right? So, thinking about some signs of burnout among educators, you see a loss of passion, a loss of enthusiasm for teaching. And for me, I started feeling that once upon a time, where I was in my teaching career, and I decided to make a change, right? So, I decided to leave the classroom and just find different ways to teach and educate, and that has worked for me, right? But it's not always the same for others. I still maintain that excitement about teaching, but it's not the same for others. So, when you start seeing that enthusiasm die, when you start seeing that loss of passion, educators who once felt excited about their work now find themselves disengaged. They don't want to show up. They're getting the Monday blues. This is a sign, right? This is a sign that you are beginning to be burned out, right? You're impatient with your students, you're impatient with your colleagues, and this even trickles over into family members. That's where you're going to see some changes. Now, the physical symptoms, right? These can manifest as well. There's the headaches, the fatigue, the insomnia. There are some educators who even start getting sick constantly. I mean, when you work in education, granted, you're around kids, they're sticking their nose and their fingers in their noses and they're touching everything. Yes, yes, I understand. You can get sick rather easily. But if you see that your immune system is weakening, right? You're susceptible to more illnesses, you're getting sick more often than usual. This is a physical manifestation of burnout. Now, why is it important to recognize burnout? This is important because if we recognize burnout, right, it's the first step at addressing what's really going on. If you address it, well, first of all, if you recognize it, then you address it. This is a great way to kind of put a little bit of a stopper on the harm that's happening, right? Because when educators are burnt out, it not only affects their own well-being, but it affects the well-being of their students, right? And their colleagues and everyone else around them. Now, I've worked in early childhood, and so, we are familiar with NAEYC, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and there's a document that they have called the Code of Ethical Conduct, and this references, how you relate to your children in the classroom, your peers, as well as families. Now, think about burnout from that perspective, right? If you are feeling burned out, if you are starting to get these symptoms, it's going to trickle out the same way, right? It's going to trickle out to the children, then your colleagues, and then the families and the parents. And this does not help anyone, right? It affects your job performance. It affects your ability to show up to work every day. And if you can't show up to work, these children lose. So it's something I really want you to be mindful of as you're starting to recognize the burnout and address the burnout itself, right? Not only within yourself, but also letting everyone else know what's happening with you, right? So, ignoring burnout can really cause not only a cycle of stress and dissatisfaction with the education system, but you're not feeling supported, you're not feeling heard. And when this comes down to it, right, it starts to affect your mental health and your well-being. Now, you can choose different paths, right? You can choose to leave the field. You can choose to, go into a different profession. You can go into tech. You can probably even take a sabbatical, right? Yes, that's a thing. You can take a sabbatical and leave your job for a year, right? Or more, whatever feels right for you. So the one thing that you have to think about this is, right? And I know it's important for us to think about ourselves, but in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about the students as well. Now, if you're burnt out, if you're like, I'm done, I'm ready to leave the field, who loses in this scenario? I mean, who really loses the most? The children. The children are going to lose the most. So you want to make sure that if you think or if you believe that you want to continue teaching, and this is the thing for you, you want to make sure that you are addressing the burnout, you are addressing what's going on with you so that you're able to support your students more. Now, I want you to think about what can be done to address burnout, right, among educators. First and foremost, it's essential for schools and education institutions to prioritize staff well-being. And any admins out there listening to this, this is for you. First of all, if schools, if admins, right, if the institutions aren't addressing and prioritizing teacher well-being, there'll be no institution, right? I don't think these individuals realize that without the educators, there is no institution. And so we can say we want students, we want to bring in more students, or we want to do all these things. But without the educators, what do we have, right? So this means for educators that they need to create a supportive work environment first and foremost. Educators need to feel valued and respected, and they need to be able to feel like they can seek help when they need it and not feel as if they're complaining or they're nagging or they're whining, right? Because they can't do their job if they're not 100%. And that's really, really important, and why I'm addressing it here. Now, it's also important for educators to practice self-care. And that's something that I've been working on throughout my career as an educator, and something that I've really been trying to get my student teachers into is self-care, right? Setting those boundaries in order to prevent burnout. You don't want to get to the end, and you're just like, I'm done, or you're collapsing, or you're to the point where there's no return. You want to practice self-care, right? While you still care about what you do, while you still care about your work as an educator, right? And so it's important for you to set time, right? Set time for yourself. Put time aside for relaxation. You want to set time for your hobbies outside of work. Again, that goes back to me starting this podcast and having my blog and doing things outside of teaching and education, right? That's also why I travel, and I travel with my kids and travel with family and do solo travel, because these are things that are going to help me, right? And I'm sure will help all of you to kind of practice that self-care that's needed if you want to continue teaching. It's also important, and listen carefully to this, it's also important to take care of your mental health. And this is something that no one talks about enough. This is something that people on the surface level might say, hey, you might need to see someone. But no one's really taking a deep dive into seeing a mental health professional, seeing a therapist, getting counseling in order for you to continue being the best you can be at your job, right? We can't help our students if we aren't helping ourselves. Now, I've been doing this SEL yoga program. It's been awesome for me. It's been really helping me. I've been connecting with educators from other parts of the country, a lot of educators from New York City, actually. And it's been very, very helpful in thinking about my own mindfulness of my students, how I can bring, yoga and meditation into my classroom. And I think this is something that we don't take advantage of enough. If there are resources out there for you, please seek them out. Please find them. It's going to help you to do your job better, right? Now, finally, right, addressing burnout requires systematic change. Yes, I know it's something that no one wants to talk about, and it starts at the head, right? We need from the Board of Education, the governmental Board of Education, right? The State Department of Ed. We need these institutions to work on canceling that student debt, right? That's first and foremost. We need systematic change, right? Within the education system, there's so much pressure, there's so much things that we have to do, so many tasks that we have to meet, and we've got to meet these numbers and meet these measurements, and no one is fostering that communication and collaboration that's necessary, right? Not only for ourselves as educators, but our children, right? They matter and they're important in this equation as well. So it's important that systematic change happens, right? And it's also important for us to just remember that if we love what we do, right, even if we can't do it the traditional way, there are other ways to do it, right? I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. You can teach abroad, you can teach remote. There's a lot of things that you can do to continue that passion of teaching, right? It might not look the way it looks today or how it looked yesterday. But if you want to continue being an educator, if you want to continue supporting your students, there are different ways that we can take a route to doing the things that we love, right? So just to wrap things up, the important thing here is to recognize burnout, right? Because this is going to initiate a change within the education system. I know a lot of people are leaving. I mean, the numbers are there. It's a mass exodus, right? But it's important for us to see the signs before people leave. It's important for us to see the signs and the symptoms before the burnout spills over into our lives and start to affect us in ways that we really don't want, right? Be proactive, address what's going on, let your admin know what's going on, let your family know what's going on, so that we can address it in a holistic way, right? Because that's the only way for us to move on and continue doing the things that we love to do. Now, that's it for us today on our episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Now, until next time, this is KJ. Bye.